Of course, the nice thing about a face-to-face environment is there is an ending time for this meeting, even if we start late. So I don't know if this is so much a training / workshop / food for thought for you and for your instructors. This is my last semester as the online instructional coach, and so one of the things I'm really trying to do this semester is capture, archive, report out on all the things I've learned. And so this is one of the culminations of the stuff that I've learned. That doesn't make sense, but it's Friday. So this has been called various things. I'm calling it dialing in teaching and learning. It's really about time management for faculty and student success. If you've been around online learning for many years, you may have seen a version of this years ago called Teaching Online in 3 Hours a Week. I mean, so these ideas have been kind of percolating around for a long time. So I will ask you to do some writing. I have a handout, because I know you can't do a training without a handout. I'm really looking for feedback on this, so if it makes sense, let me know. If there are things that don't make sense, let me know that too. I will be doing a webinar version of this later this semester. So I did one last semester. This is a revamped version of that webinar with some new ideas in it. What else? These are just my ideas. So food for thought. Use them if you want to. So most of you know me pretty well, but I just want to give you a sense of where I'm coming from if you don't know me as well as some of you do. I am really interested in win-win teaching and learning. So I'm interested in solutions that are good for students and good for us. And I think most of the solutions that work for students actually do work for faculty too. But that's really what I'm looking for. When I think about a quality course, that's one where students are successful and we are successful too. Action research, culture of inquiry, I mean, that really goes to what we were talking about at the beginning. This is why I value reflections so much, because when you reflect on what you're doing, you can actually own what you're doing in a way that I'm not sure, if you don't reflect, I'm not sure you're even aware of what you're doing or not doing. And the culture of inquiry part is that conversation, right? I mean, we are, I don't know, 20 years into online teaching and learning, so there's no one else to look to except your fellow teachers as experts. So there are none, but we're the best there are. So let me see if you think this is true. I do think there's a paradox in online learning when our instructors say teaching takes too much time, but students experience a lack of instructor presence. I think in my experience in online learning, that's pretty typical. Instructors struggle to keep up, and students often in the same class say there's no teacher here. I don't think we can ask our teachers to do more, but certainly students should expect to have an experience of a teacher in their class. So I will offer some tips and tricks, but this is really more than that. This is really ideas that are grounded in kind of a holistic view of online teaching and learning. I don't know, I've done a lot of tips and tricks presentations over the years, and they're fun, but I'm not sure they really help that much if they're just kind of tacked on to a course design that doesn't make sense in the first place. So why? Why think about time management or structuring time or thinking about it? I think there are 3 reasons. Our success, our students' success, and accreditation and compliance issues. So briefly I'll talk about those. So again, those of you who have seen this presentation, everybody wanted to come to this because they wanted to know, how can I possibly teach my class in only 3 hours a week? Please help me teach in a more reasonable amount of time. And I think when some online leads or chairs or administrators or students hear this, this is what they think. I actually get to have 3 hours of teaching in my class? Yeah, that'd be great if I actually had a teacher. So again, I think this speaks to this paradox where we feel and are overworked, but students are often, again, I'm speaking in generalizations here, often worried or they don't experience teaching. And as leads and chairs who get student complaints, that is probably the most common complaint. There's no teacher in the class. So, question for you. How many days, Monday through Friday, do you log into your course on a typical week? Or what would the instructors in your area say? And what if you throw weekends in there too? So yeah, well, this is data from our instructors and faculty over the last couple of years. So this is Monday through Friday. Almost everybody's on 5 days a week. And I don't know if I have the Saturday and Sunday one. Yeah. So I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, our experience is typical of what everyone's telling us. Again, I guess I see this in two ways. One, it is awesome that our teachers are so dedicated that they're willing to teach 7 days a week. As a coach and someone who teaches ethics, this is worrying to me, both from a standpoint of equity and also from a standpoint of sustainability. When we feel like we have to teach 7 days a week, and yet our students still don't see us in the classes. So this is, yes. I think that's part of the reason I want to talk about that is to help people figure out that stuff, but I don't think we know. So I'm going to get to that. That's really the whole point of this presentation.
Yeah, my question is, what do you mean by instructor presence? Here's an example. I log in at 6 o'clock, yes, that's the end. And I start grading my students' initiatives, which are 3 projects per student, and about 2 or 4 classes. So a grade all day until 10 o'clock.
Well, it's not up to me to define. It's not up to me to define instructor presence. What I'm reporting is that our students say that there is a lack of instructor presence. Well, I think maybe we should ask our students that. So, I guess my point is, if you're teaching, if you're online 12 hours a day, and I'm not saying this is true of you, I'm talking in general. Now, whether grading counts as teaching, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that's a question worth asking. Satisfaction. I'm sorry I'm going fast just because I've got quite a bit of stuff to cover and I'm happy to follow up later. So this question asked, how much satisfaction do you get from teaching your online courses? This is 2 years of data. Our instructors are pretty satisfied with their online teaching. But when we compare it to their satisfaction with face-to-face teaching, since it's the same people, we're happier with our face-to-face teaching than our online teaching, and these are those of us who teach online. So we work harder, but we're less satisfied. And when I ask people, which I've done a lot over the last couple of years, what do you love about online teaching? What parts of being an online teacher make you feel most like a teacher? Because my sense is this is part of what makes us satisfied or dissatisfied with our courses, that we actually get to feel like teachers. These are the top 3 comments that have come up in my research over the last couple of years, and I think Bernie can attest to. I'm an instructor or the online teaching workshop that I'm doing right now. These are the same kinds of things that the people in the workshop are saying. What makes us feel like teachers online? Watching my students improve, learn, and demonstrate skills, connecting with them, and capturing the teachable moment. So I think this is more or less what we want as teachers. So maybe we're not satisfied or as satisfied because we're not getting as much of this stuff. So how about our students? What do we know about them? What about success rates? Why do they take online classes and how do they view quality? Well, I think this is what I think I know. Our students succeed at a lower rate in the same class. Most students, but not all, would really prefer to take face-to-face classes if they could. The data on that is shaky, but what I've seen from the survey of currently enrolled students is, most students, if they could find a face-to-face class that met their schedule, that's what they would do. They're taking online classes for flexibility and schedule. which really tells me these are not students that are some separate group of students that are online learners that know they learn best online. So it might make sense that they really hope to get a similar experience to that face-to-face class that they really wish they could take, but they can't, right? They want a teacher too. And again, my research shows that the most important thing to online students is an engaged teacher. And most of you have seen this. This is a master teacher nomination research for 2 years. And that big circle in the middle is all the student comments that have to do with instructor presence. So if you want to know what students think instructor presence is, these are the sorts of things that our students tell us when they nominate courses as master teachers. You know, instructors adaptive presence, they make it fun, there's a personal connection. I have someone who wants me to learn, that cares about me, that's personalizing the course, that's bringing it to life, that's treating me like a real student, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the paradox, right? I think we know what students want, maybe not what they're not getting. We know what we want. My sense is we don't want the same kind of course, right? We want a kind of course where we can engage students, where we can capture the teachable moment. That's what students want. And we also want to make sure that we can do it in a reasonable amount of time. So last but not least, compliance issues. So Tammy mentioned this a little bit this morning. Maybe one of the reasons why we need to care about this stuff is when we come up to accreditation, this is the HLC's rule on how a course should be designed and how accreditors work. This is also the federal government's rule. So I do understand why the college cares, because I think our whole idea that we're an accredited institution and can give federal financial aid is based on the fact that we live up to this expectation. So according to the federal credit hour definition in the Higher Learning Commission, a credit hour equates to at least 1 hour of classroom or instructor-directed teaching and a minimum of 2 hours of out-of-class student work per week for a 15-week class. You know, what's interesting is they, meaning the federal government and the HLC, they just assume whatever happens in a live class is instructor-directed teaching. But they call out hybrid and online classes as modalities where we will be subject to additional scrutiny. They're not going to ask face-to-face classes to prove that there's 3 hours of teaching a week. Obviously, they think there is because the class meets for 3 hours a week. And whether I think that makes sense or not doesn't matter, right? But they assume that because classes meet live for 3 hours a week, they have 3 hours of teaching. They're not going to assume that's true of hybrid and online classes, and I think it may be on us to demonstrate that, in fact, our classes have this instructor-directed teaching. Now, normally I'm someone who doesn't like external compliance issues, but looking at this definition really helped clarify for me why we might want to actually think seriously about what is the instructor-directed teaching in our courses. Again, I do realize that we're spending lots of hours online, and many of us want to say it's all teaching, and we're talking about that in the online teaching workshop, but I think it's worth paying special attention to this instructor-directed teaching. So I want to talk about maybe what a comprehensive pedagogical design for a course is. So here's a course. We've got the blue circle is the teacher, and the green is students, and this is more or less how a 3-credit course, according to the federal government and the HLC, should fall out. There should be 3 hours of instructor-directed teaching. That's the mediated stuff that would happen in the classroom. 6 to 9 hours of outside work for students, right? Homework and whatever else they're doing. And then, you know, independent instructor work, whatever that is, grading, prepping, planning. And this adds up to 6 hours because that's how much Farmings thinks, that's how much we get paid. We get paid for 6 hours per class, right, for a 3-credit class. So do we really teach it in 6 hours? No. But just, you know, entertain this idea for me. I don't know, until I started doing this work last year, I never ever sat down and actually tried to think about, what am I actually doing in my classes? What are my students, am I actually giving them 6 to 9 hours worth of work? What do I think counts is this stuff here. Just a sample. In a 3-credit class, you might want to think about something like this. What are all the things you're doing, and how many hours does it add up to? What are all the expectations you're giving your students, and how many hours does it add up to? I'll talk about this later, but when we asked this question on a survey of online instructors a few years ago, total up all the things you want your students to do, and how many minutes or how many hours do you expect them to spend on per week? The range was something like 4 hours to 24 hours, right? I mean, so that tells me some of us are probably not asking students to do enough, and if you think your students can do 20 hours of work a week in your class, it's probably too much. So let's think about the traditional model. What happens here? What constitutes teaching in a traditional class?
Lecture.
Yeah, lecture, activities, class discussions. Yeah, I guess, whatever you're doing when you teach live, that's here. So, I mean, I guess according to HLC, even if you're just sitting there having students watch videos, that's happening here. Again, I do think it's interesting because I don't know how often we actually sit down and wonder whether what we're doing in face-to-face classes counts as teaching. So thinking about hybrid and online classes is definitely causing me to think about face-to-face classes in a different way too. So how about a flipped class? Here's what I think a flipped class is. Same amount of hours, same outcomes, same expectations. A flipped class is saying, I'm going to reallocate some of the things that used to happen here, and I'm going to turn them into independent student work and independent instructor work. Instead of lecturing, I'm going to build off of online lectures and make my students watch them outside of class, and instead of doing homework out here, we're going to do the homework here, or whatever, right? But I mean, if you're flipping a class, you're not changing your objectives, you're changing how you're allocating me time versus independent instructor time versus student time. And so, I don't know, flipped classes do a lot of different things, but that's what they're doing. Flipped classes is saying, this mediated time is so important, I can't waste it on lectures. I need to actually use that time in a way that serves student learning in a better way, or whatever. And different people may have different ideas about how to use this time, but clearly that's why we flip a class, because we want to change up what students are doing out here versus in here. We're going to do formative assessment in class instead of doing it outside of class, or whatever. Now, a hybrid class is this. Theoretically, anyway. In a hybrid class, you're still, whatever portion of your class is online, that portion of the teaching should be online. Skip that. And online. So, same objectives. Everything's online. And here's where I think one of the problems comes in. When we teach face-to-face, we may say it's all important, but I don't think we say it's all teaching. We think this part is special in a face-to-face class, right? Something's happening here that is really important. You may skip grading if you're busy, but you're not going to skip going to class, right? I mean, that's just critical. I think when we moved online, this line got blurred or removed, and so now it's all teaching or it's all grading. So is it a false distinction? Because in an online class, you don't have to make this distinction. I think it's really, really important to think about for ourselves and for students. So I think a traditional class might look something like this if you planned it. What are students doing outside of class? They're reading, writing essays, studying notes, watching online lectures. What am I doing outside of class? I don't know, grading, writing feedback, lesson planning. And what do we want to happen here? Well, I don't know, I'm actually going to plot out a lecture, discussion, examples, working problems, something like that. Now, I don't know that you've ever done this. I've never done this for a face-to-face class. But I think it would be fruitful to think about doing this sort of pedagogical planning for our online classes for a few reasons. Note about course pacing. First of all, it happens automatically in a face-to-face class. There's a natural progression from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. And it's important because students automatically know where the instructor-directed teaching is happening, right? That's when they're in class. They know then that their independent student work should probably bookend that, right? They do homework to prep for coming to class. And you don't ever have to tell students this. They know that homework comes in between classes or over the weekend. And you know that your independent work probably happens on the off days. This pacing is just built in automatically. Students have a sense it's not everything due on Friday, right? I mean, that's not how classes work. There's work that has to be done during the week in order to accomplish the goals. So automatically built into online classes. So how do we think about online pedagogy? I think we want to do something really similar. So what's here? So I'm going to give you a minute so I can take a breath. Either jot down or think about, I mean, what do you define as online teaching? I know you do, everything you do is important, so don't tell me that. If you had to say what part of it is the most important, what part of it is teaching, what part correlates to the classroom that you would never miss, even if you're going to skip grading, right? I mean, what is that vital part that happens in your class for 3 hours? I don't think I'm working it. She has ideas. Thoughts? I mean, what do you, how are you defining it? Corey, I'm going to pick on you.
Corey and I did a screencast that I made that year. And, I think most of us would agree discussion.
Discussions, screencasts.
I have one distinction on the screencast. It's not just the overall screencast, it's that, welcome to this week, this is what we're doing in the screencast.
So not the canned lecture that you just rotate every semester, but you want to say something where you're directly interfacing with these particular students.
Yeah,
this week.
To me, it's three things. First is web topics that I have for students. Doing the recorded lectures that they can listen to, which sometimes I think some of them do. Those are the probably skip through the class. And then it's the special topics, problems that students run into, such as tutorials, like webcast, screencast, things that are specific to that particular set of students.
Would you call that feedback?
No. Feedback, to me, is part of the learning process.
So what else? Let me take a couple more thoughts. So we've got discussions, we've got screencasts, directed screencasts. John?
I mean, I'd say the feedback is really essential because students go all whole semester and then they'll get feedback from their instructor, and all of a sudden everything's created in the last 2 weeks and they fail because they don't know what the instructor wanted. So.
I mean, definitely, one of the things we do in live face-to-face classes is we do formative assessments and we give feedback in class. So, I mean, I think, at least for me, talking about some kinds of feedback as teaching could make sense. All right, let's move on.
Explaining the weekly assignments is critical.
Yeah, I mean, all the things you do, you can do that in a midweek or a, beginning of the week screencast or an update. So, from me to you, I don't know what instructor-directed teaching is online. The HLC doesn't define it, thankfully. Federal government doesn't define it. That's really good. But I think that you need to know for yourself what you're counting as teaching. So you can make sure your students know what you're counting as teaching. Because probably what you're counting as teaching is that part that you think is vital. So if you think your online lectures are teaching, you better really make sure your students really do realize it's the same thing as skipping class, right? Or whatever. So I think I don't want to define it. I'm not in favor of coming up with a definition. But I think if someone asks, where's the teaching or where's the instructor-directed teaching, we need to know for ourselves, for our own sakes. So I'm going to skip this just for the sake of time. And I'm happy to work with you as a coach on this. I mean, this is really what I think most people want to talk about when they work on coaching is, you know, I mean, how do I make my class the kind of place where I can teach? Here are some of the things that have come up in previous discussions about what counts as online teaching. Discussion, posting announcements, facilitating group work, chat or video conferencing sessions, formative assessment and feedback, participating in discussions, screencasts, etc. All right, maybe you're not convinced yet. Why do I really think we need to focus on this 3 hours of teaching a week? And again, I'm talking about the typical 3-credit lecture class. If we do, then the other components of the class automatically fall into place, right? We've got that. But I decided for me, this is me, my teaching constitutes 2 hours a week of posting and replying to discussions, and about an hour a week of creating screencasts for my students, right? So that would be midweek updates, formative assessment that goes up by screencasts, and I don't know, stuff that goes to writing prompts. So I've allocated my teaching time, which kind of defines for me what my students need to be doing, because that mediated time is usually, you know, it's not just me doing it and students doing it. If I want to spend 2 hours in discussions, I need to make sure that I've told my students that they need to be spending a significant amount of time in discussions. So I have something to do in there. It's like, you know, if I want my students, if I want to lecture, they need to come to class. So this is the same thing. I'm deciding what I'm counting as teaching. It helps me think about how to tell students what they need to do. They also need to do these guided thinking activities to give me an opportunity to do the formative assessment and give the feedback at the end of the week, right? If they're not doing the work, I can't do my teaching. And if they don't watch my feedback, then there's no point in doing it. And once we get that, then I can decide, well, if this is what I'm counting as 3 hours of my work, what else do I have to do that may be less important that really every week? I need to make sure the grading is done. I need to do my other kind of feedback that I don't count as teaching, right? That's more just to individual students. And I need to answer some emails, and I need to update my course and do those kinds of things. And then I can really think about the homework, quote unquote, homework that students need to do. They're not interacting with me, they're doing reading, watching stuff, maybe participating in discussion and doing whatever work they have to do. Sorry about that on the screen. And, you know, this should add up to something like 6 to 9 hours a week. If it adds up to more, I'm probably expecting too much. And if it adds up, it's not enough, then I'm probably not doing that. You can play around with what ifs. What if you have a different definition of teaching? What if you want to do individualized instruction and feedback on essays in progress, and you want to do a Google Hangout as teaching? Well, then your students need to come to the Google Hangout, if that's what you call teaching. And if you want to give individualized feedback on their work in progress, then they really need to make sure they do that work so that you have something to comment on. So again, you can think about what ifs, right? All these what ifs. What if this is your teaching or this is your teaching? You can think about how it would impact what the students are doing. What else? If we don't differentiate teaching from all those other important things, then I think there are two possibilities, and it's a dilemma. They're both bad. Either there's no teaching, and this leads to alienation, apathy, and dissatisfaction. And here's what I mean by that. When we become graders in our own classes, I think people get bored, and then they get tired of online teaching. I don't think that's why we're here. I don't think we're here to grade. I think we're here to teach. Grading is important, but it's not teaching. So I think if we don't identify for ourselves what we call teaching, we will not be happy. And if it's all teaching, I'm really afraid people will burn out, because then everything takes on this huge amount of importance. And then there's anxiety, because I think I have to be in there all the time, because students are waiting for me every minute to answer an email or whatever. Sorry about that. So you've probably seen this. Students want to do all their work on 1 day a week, and if we haven't thought about this, you know, we may be teaching a class where we're only really grading and students are kind of doing their own thing, and that's not going to make students happy, and that's not going to make us happy. How about this? they're working all the time, but we're just independent. You know? So this is the class I think that happens where someone's in there 12 hours a week, and they're working, killing themselves, but for whatever reason, they're not in sync with their students. The students don't know where to see them. They don't know where to look. If they want that participation, they want to know there's an instructor there. They're just not sure where to look. And I've definitely seen this happen. Everything's trying to happen all the time. And I don't think this is a recipe for success either. I think you want to think about what is your plan, right? I mean, when are you doing your teaching? When should students expect to see you? I think, and I won't speak for Carrie, but she can correct me. We have worked really hard in our online class because we're teaching a 6-credit learning community. There is, how many hours a week is that? That's like 20 hours a week our students should be spending in that class. They can't do everything on Friday, right? They have to work all throughout the week. And I think we've worked hard to help our students pace the week. What do they need to do first so they can succeed at the stuff in the middle of the week? Why do we have stuff due in the middle of the week? Well, so then you can accomplish the stuff that's due at the end of the week. Again, I don't know what works or what's right, but some kind of plan that you can think about for yourself and communicate to your students. And if we do highlight online teaching, we can prioritize teaching, which is what I think we want to do, and we can open up these opportunities for meaningful engagement, right? This middle circle. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think this is the virtuous course that we want and our students want, right? This is where teaching and learning happens, right? Where we're engaged with our students. I don't mean it to be overwhelming. In fact, I will say I think in the class Carrie and I are teaching, we have a very manageable workload. I mean, I think I'm one of the rare online teachers that really thinks I teach within the bounds of what I think is a manageable workload. But I try to prioritize this